Hey Thomas, tell us how your passion for RPGs was born and how you went from player to author.
Before I answer that question, I'd just like to say that I love this channel and all of these interviews that you're doing. It's exposing me to a bunch of different perspectives from designers around the world who, some of whom I already know and admire, and some of whom I'm not familiar with their work. So it's getting exposure of them out there. And I think that's great. I love that you're bringing together all of these different design cultures. Thanks for doing that. So how my passion for RPGs was born and how I went from player to author is I was first exposed to role-playing games at the same time that I was exposed to modern German European-style board games by my friend John Carpenter, who I met in fencing class, and he invited me to a Dungeons and Dragons game. I was immediately enthralled by it and played a whole lot of both Dungeons and Dragons and also other games like the old White Wolf stuff, Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Exalted, as well as some, at the time, more obscure things like GURPS and Rifts. And then also played a whole lot of board games. And my first times designing games was actually in the board game sphere rather than in role-playing games. My first game that I designed was Professor Pugnacious's Portfolio of Perils, Pugilism, and Perfidy, which is a steampunk heroes versus gothic horrors deck-building game. And then I designed Cultists of Cthulhu, which is a big box Ameritrash game that is cooperative, except that one of the players is secretly a cultist who wants to sacrifice everybody else. And it was the storytelling possibilities of Ameritrash games and the incentive and mechanic sensibilities of tabletop board game design in general that got me interested in designing for role-playing games. And that is what led to me creating my first role-playing game, Murder Most Foul.
You're the author of Murder Most Foul, which you define an infinitely replayable murder mystery dinner party game, RPG, and LARP. Tell us something about this title and where the idea came from.
Sure. So this is Murder Most Foul, my first role-playing game. I call it a couple of different things like that because you do need a physical space to play it in where you can stand up and walk around. It is a murder mystery dinner party game. It's meant to be played over the course of an evening, during which you have a dinner party where people eat and drink and socialize. My inspiration for this was murder mystery stories like those of Agatha Christie, especially. And I love those murder mystery dinner party games that you may already be familiar with, where you buy a box and it comes with characters and a story and everything. The problems that I have with those is that they tend to be pre-written and you're basically acting out an already determined script. It's already established who the killer is beforehand. So every time that you play one of those, you can't ever play it again because you know the solution to the mystery. And so what I wanted to do was to see if I could take some of the principles from board game design of giving the players different goals and incentives for how to behave and create a mechanized way of generating that kind of story. And so the way that Murder Most Foul works is that one player is the host. Their goal is to get murdered. One player is the detective. Their goal is to solve the murder, that is, correctly accuse the killer at the end of the game. And everybody else is a guest or suspect whose goal is to commit the murder and then get away with it. And so even if you play with the same scenario, the same characters and background and setup for it, the outcome of the game will be different every time because it's an actual contest of skill as to who commits the murder and then whether or not the detective is able to use their real-life deductive reasoning to figure that out. So the game comes with a bit more detailed rules, including extra motives for how the characters feel about each other, and also comes with a number of scenarios. And a scenario consists of a bit of information about the background of the situation, character descriptions for each of the different characters you can play as, and because it's a dinner party game, each scenario also comes with a food recipe and a drink recipe that are thematically appropriate.
Your new game is Fear of the Unknown, coming soon to Kickstarter. The quick start is already available on the itch.io page of Sixpence Games for those who want to try it. Can you tell something more about this project? When will it be launched?
Certainly. So Fear of the Unknown is my love letter to horror movies. As you may have guessed from all the different games that I've already talked about, I love horror as a genre, and I love horror movies as a specific medium instantiating that genre. And so Fear of the Unknown, the idea with this game is that it is a zero prep horror mystery game. The tagline is solve mysteries, encounter horrors, face perils, and see how that changes you as a person. The idea is that you sit down with your friends and you collaboratively together create the setting, and then your characters and the oracle or game master comes up with a mystery, which is a secret that the other players will want to uncover, and a inciting incident, which is where they learn that there is a secret to uncover. It will come in two versions, the paperback core version, which is all of the rules and everything you need to play, and the limited edition Book of the Dead version, which will be full color and have more artwork, but otherwise have much the same content. You can play with either one and you won't be missing anything. My intention at the moment is to launch the Kickstarter in October, the spookiest month, which will be thematically appropriate. And yeah, I'm really proud of this game. I've playtested it over 100 times at this point and been working on it for a bit more than 2 years, and it's come along very well. I've played it with a number of different game designers, such as Scott Dorward, who's worked on Pulp Cthulhu and Call of Cthulhu, and a number of other people, including some folks in the movie industry who've worked on horror films, and it's been a resounding hit, so I'm very happy with it. You basically just sit down and write a horror movie with your friends.
How important is crowdfunding in the world of games?
I think that crowdfunding is incredibly important. Thanks to the proliferation of technology and websites like DriveThruRPG and itch.io, it's easier than ever to create a game and get it out there and make it available to people. But I think crowdfunding is especially important for two main reasons. One is making it so that you are able to make some money off of doing this. It's always helpful to be able to afford food and pay the bills. And the second thing is that it gives a nice defined window where you can really get people's eyes on your project and get people to pay attention to it and check it out and give them a little sense of urgency that they might not otherwise have if you just put it out there and say, hey, this is available now and forever. And so I think it's extremely important, especially for people who are in underserved communities or perhaps have access to fewer resources to produce the game themselves, and double especially if they want to make it like I do in a physical form in addition to a digital form. Which personally, I'm a huge fan of physical books because, at least for me, they're harder to lose than PDFs.
Which authors influenced you the most?
So I'm actually including a ludography in my game Fear of the Unknown, where a ludography is like a bibliography or videography, except that instead of citing books and videos that have influenced you, it's citing games. So I'm just going to go through that real quick and tell you about the 6 games that most influenced me with Fear of the Unknown and talk about them and their authors a little. So first up is Call of Cthulhu by Sandy Peterson, which was the first horror and investigation role-playing game that I ever played, and I think the first one ever. It introduced me to that concept and got me started thinking about what could be done in that sort of space and what I want out of the mechanics to influence and generate those kinds of stories. Next up is Apocalypse World by Vincent and Magui Baker. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Apocalypse World, and Powered by the Apocalypse in general, taught me about having a story-first game, with mechanics that don't try to simulate a world, but instead affect the narrative. And that blew my mind and gave me an entirely different perspective to start looking at that sort of game from. Then City of Mist taught me about building characters out of descriptive phrases and unique character traits instead of using numerical values of the same statistics that all characters share, which I think generates more literary and interesting and distinctive and unique characters. And so I think that has been incredibly valuable and I would say City of Mist is the single game that is most influential on my development of Fear of the Unknown. And City of Mist was written by Amit Moshe. Then Gumshoe and its hacks taught me about how to make investigation fun and rewarding and avoid frustration and be guaranteed to move the story forward. Sadly, I don't own a physical copy of Gumshoe, but I have a PDF of it. It was developed by Robin Laws, who is also a very influential writer. He's written a number of essays about game design and about running games that were very influential to me as a young game master, running games of Dungeons and Dragons and other things. Then Turn of the Card, which I have right here, is a role-playing game played using tarot cards. This is actually a deck of tarot cards right here. It was created by Paul Abeta and Jefferson Lee, and it taught me about how enjoyable it is to have mechanics that give specific yet open-ended prompts to let the players improvise on, finding a fun balance between entirely promptless and overly restrictive. And I think that's just so much fun, so enjoyable to play. And finally, Dread, which was designed by Epidiah Ravachol and Nathaniel Barmore, taught me about creating tension and fear by moving inexorably closer to death while always leaving open the possibility of success if you are good and lucky enough. And I think Dread is one of the most successful horror role-playing games in terms of creating that sort of feeling of tension. And I think that it's wonderful. It, like Fear of the Unknown, focuses largely on one-shots. And I think that if you haven't played it yet and you're a fan of horror, you should do yourself a favor and give it a try, especially in a convention atmosphere. It works very well in that sort of situation. So those are the 6 games that I think have been most influential on my journey in creating Fear of the Unknown. So thank you for taking this time to talk to me, Paolo. I really love what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to continuing to watch all of the interviews that you put up.